The day I realized my neighbor's infinity pool was draining straight into my orchard, I felt something in my chest drop that I can only describe as grief. Not anger. Not yet. Just this slow, heavy grief. Because I knew, before a single lab test confirmed it, that 34 years of my family's work might already be slipping downhill with that water. I run a small organic apple orchard in western North Carolina. 15 acres of hillside trees my parents planted in 1990, back when everyone said organic was a cute hobby, but not a real business. I grew up between those rows. I learned to drive on a tractor older than me. I learned math counting bushels. I learned patience watching blossoms survive late frost by pure stubbornness. We earned our organic certification the hard way. 3 full years of documented practices, soil tests, audits, inspectors walking the rows with clipboards and skeptical expressions. You don't just say you're organic. You prove it. And once you have it, you guard it like it's your last name. Because one contamination event can wipe it out overnight. For most of my life, the land downhill from us was just quiet woods and an old hunting cabin that sagged more every winter. Then 2 years ago, that property sold. The rumor at the feed store was that some tech investor from California bought it sight unseen. A guy named Grant Hollis. I didn't think much of it at first. People move in, people move out. That's country life now. But then the clearing started. Trees came down by the dozens. Excavators chewed up the slope. Concrete trucks rolled in like a parade. By spring, there was a house skeleton perched below my orchard that looked like something from a design magazine. All glass and steel and sharp angles. 8,000 square feet, someone said. And out back, cantilevered toward my hillside like it was leaning in for a better look, was the frame for an infinity pool. I remember standing at the fence line with my wife, Laura, watching the crews. She squinted down at the forming pool basin and said, half joking, half not, "Well, I hope that thing doesn't end up draining into our apples." That sentence stuck with me. A week later, I drove down and introduced myself. Grant was younger than I expected. Early 40s maybe. Fit, tanned, expensive sunglasses even though it was cloudy. He shook my hand like we were about to close a deal. "Hey neighbor," he said. "You must be the orchard guy." "That's me. Caleb Mercer." We made small talk. He told me he'd made his money in blockchain infrastructure, which I nodded at like I understood. He talked about wanting a retreat, a place to unplug, clean air, mountain views. I told him I hoped he liked apple pie because we made a lot of it. Then I asked about the pool. "Just curious," I said, trying to keep it light. "How's the overflow system set up?" He grinned. "Infinity edge. It spills into a catch basin and drains downhill. Totally engineered. Top of the line." "Downhill where?" I asked. He gestured vaguely. "Natural grade. Toward the tree line. Our tree line." I didn't push it that day, but that night I pulled up the county permit filings online. Buried in the drainage diagrams was a detail that made my stomach twist. The overflow discharge line followed the slope directly toward the lower section of my orchard. The next morning I called our organic certifier, a woman named Denise who had audited us for years. "If chlorinated pool water enters our soil, even diluted, what happens?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "If it's verified contamination, we suspend certification immediately pending remediation. There are no exceptions, Caleb. You know that." I didn't know that. That's what made it worse. I met Grant again in May. This time I brought printed diagrams. "Look," I said, laying them across the hood of my truck, "if chlorinated water runs onto my land, even occasionally, it could destroy our soil biology. It could cost us our certification." He scanned the paper for maybe 3 seconds. "The system meets code," he said. "My architect signed off. County approved it. I'm not arguing code. I'm telling you what it does to my land." He sighed, like I was asking him to move a mountain. "Rerouting drainage now would mean redesigning the terrace. That's 6 figures. You want me to eat that because you're worried about a little chlorine?" "A little chlorine is all it takes," I said. He took off his sunglasses then, and for a second I saw something under the polish. Annoyance. Maybe even contempt. "You organic guys act like 1 drop of anything synthetic is the apocalypse," he said. "Talk to your agency. See if they'll give you an exemption." "There are no exemptions." He shrugged. "Not my problem." I drove back up that hill feeling smaller than I had in a long time. I called the county. They confirmed the system met current building code. I called a soil scientist I knew at NC State. He confirmed what I already knew about chlorine's impact on microbial life. And then I waited. By August, The house was finished. It was stunning, I'll give him that. The pool stretched like a sheet of glass into the horizon, reflecting my orchard in its surface like it owned the view. The first week they filled it, we had a heavy rain. 2 days later, I noticed something strange in the lower rows of our Honey Crisps. The ground was wetter than it should have been. Not from rain. From something steady. There was a faint chemical smell. Like a public swimming pool in July. I crouched down and touched the soil. It felt wrong. Thin. Slick. I drove straight to the farm supply store and bought test strips. That evening, kneeling in the mud like I was praying to something that wouldn't answer, I dipped the strip into pooled water near the roots. 3.1 parts per million chlorine. It might not sound like much. In a backyard pool, it's normal. In certified organic soil, it's a death sentence. I sat back on my heels and just stared at the trees. Leaves that had been deep green were already paling at the edges. Laura came down the row and saw my face before she saw the strip. "It's bad," she said quietly. "Yeah," I said. "It's real bad." And that's when the grief turned into something else. Not panic. Not yet. But resolve. Because if that water was going to keep coming, I wasn't going to just stand there and watch my family's life wash away. The next morning, I didn't go to the house right away. I didn't trust myself to be calm enough. Instead, I started documenting everything. I took photos from every angle, wide shots showing the slope, close-ups of pooling water around the trunks, leaves already curling at the edges. I marked GPS coordinates on my phone. I filled mason jars with runoff water and labeled them with date and time like I was running a crime lab out of my barn. If this was going to turn into a fight, I wanted facts, not feelings. By the end of the week, the lower acre looked different. Subtle, but different. The soil that used to smell rich and alive had that faint sterile tang. Earthworms were harder to find. The trees closest to the fence line were yellowing unevenly, like they couldn't decide whether to survive or give up. I called Denise again. She came out in person this time. We walked the rows together in silence. She knelt, scooped soil into a sample bag, tested the standing water herself. When she saw the chlorine reading, she closed her eyes for a second, not dramatic, just tired. "Caleb," she said softly, "if this continues, I'll have to file a contamination report." "I know. You understand what that means." I did. Immediate suspension pending remediation. Years of rebuilding soil. Lost contracts. Farmers' market spots given to someone else. Restaurants finding a new supplier and never looking back. That afternoon, I drove down to Grant's house. He was out back with what looked like an interior designer and a photographer. They were staging lounge chairs near the pool, adjusting throw pillows like the entire world depended on symmetry. "Grant," I called from the edge of the terrace. He turned, smiled automatically, then saw my expression and dropped it. "We've got a problem," I said. He walked over slowly, hands in pockets. "What now?" I held up one of the jars. "Your overflow is hitting my orchard. 3 ppm chlorine." My certifier confirmed it. He barely glanced at the jar. "It's an infinity pool. It overflows. That's how they work. It's not supposed to poison my land." "Poison is dramatic, Caleb. Tell that to my soil." He exhaled through his nose like I was a stubborn client. "Look, the system passed inspection. If you're having issues, maybe improve your drainage. Put in a berm or something. You're telling me to build a barrier to stop your pool? I'm telling you I built my house legally." The photographer pretended not to listen, but I could feel her eyes on us. I stepped closer, lowered my voice. "If I lose my certification because of this, I will come after you for every dollar." He met my stare. "Then do what you have to do." That was the moment it stopped being a misunderstanding and became a line in the dirt. 2 weeks later, Denise sent the official notice. Organic certification suspended pending investigation and remediation. I opened that email sitting at the same kitchen table where my dad used to balance the books. For a minute, I couldn't breathe. Laura read it over my shoulder and just put her hand on my back. We didn't say anything. What was there to say? 34 years. Suspended with one paragraph. The financial hit came fast. The Asheville restaurant group that bought £2,000 a month called to pause our contract. The Saturday market manager asked gently if we still qualified for the organic section. I had to say no. Grant, meanwhile, announced on social media that he was hosting a private architectural showcase. A mountain modern experience. Designers, bloggers, potential clients for his architect friend. The infinity pool would be the centerpiece. I saw the invite online and felt something click into place. If he wanted attention, I would give him context. I spent the next week installing trail cameras along our shared boundary. Not hidden, visible. I ordered large white signs and staked them along the fence line facing uphill toward his property. Organic orchard contaminated by adjacent pool drainage. Documentation in progress for legal action. Laura asked if I was sure about this. I don't want to shame him, I said. I just want the truth visible. That Saturday, the cars started arriving around 10. Teslas, Range Rovers, one matte black Porsche that looked like it had never seen gravel before. I made sure I was working the lower rows. Wide brim hat, muddy boots, pruning shears in hand. From the pool terrace, you could see everything. The signs, the cameras, the damaged trees. At first, it was just background scenery to them. Then I saw a woman in a linen blazer pause near the infinity edge and point downhill. Grant followed her gaze. Even from a distance, I could see his shoulders tighten. A little later, a man in thick black glasses and architect sneakers walked down the slope toward my fence. "Excuse me," he called. "What's going on with the signs?" I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked over. "Pool overflow from up there," I said, nodding toward the glass mansion. "Chlorinated water's been running into our orchard. We lost our organic certification last month." He frowned. "That drainage discharges to grade?" "Directly." He turned and looked back at the pool, then at the slope, then back at me. "That's a significant oversight." I almost laughed. That's one way to put it. Within an hour, the mood shifted. Guests who'd been sipping sparkling water and admiring sight lines were now whispering in clusters. A few came down to ask questions. I answered calmly. No theatrics, just facts. 3 ppm chlorine. Documented runoff. Certification suspended. Lawsuit filed for damages and remediation. Grant tried to spin it. Property line dispute, he told someone loudly. Exaggerated claims. But water doesn't lie. You could see the damp streak cutting through the grass between his terrace and my trees. Gravity is honest like that. By mid-afternoon, cars started leaving early. That Monday, an architecture blog ran a headline. "When Luxury Ignores Landscape." They didn't name Grant directly, but the photos were unmistakable. The signs, the slope, the pool hanging over it all like a careless crown. A week later, a regional design magazine picked it up, this time with commentary from an environmental engineer about responsible drainage in hillside builds. Grant called me that night. "You're trying to ruin me," he said without greeting. "I'm trying to save my farm. You could have handled this privately." I tried. In May. Remember? There was silence on the line, thick and hot. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I want my soil restored. My certification reinstated. And compensation for what we've already lost." "You're asking for $380,000, he said. "That's absurd. That's the number my attorney calculated. Lost income, remediation, reapplication costs. I didn't pull it out of thin air." He scoffed. "This is extortion." "No," I said quietly. "It's consequence." He hung up. The lawsuit moved forward. Depositions. Soil reports. Video footage from the trail cameras showing visible overflow events after heavy use and rain. Expert testimony about chlorine's impact on microbial ecosystems. Winter settled in, and the lower acre looked worse. Some trees might recover with aggressive soil rebuilding. Some wouldn't. Every time I walked that row, I felt both furious and fiercely protective, like I was standing guard over something wounded. In January, our attorneys scheduled mediation. The night before, I barely slept. Not because I doubted the evidence. Because I knew, no matter what happened in that room, something between neighbors had been permanently broken. The mediation was held in a bland office building halfway between town and the mountains, the kind of place with beige walls and bad coffee that tastes like compromise before you even sit down. I remember thinking it was fitting. Years of soil, sun, rain, sweat, reduced to a conference table and a legal pad. Grant was already there when we walked in. Navy suit. No sunglasses this time. He looked tired, not in a dramatic way, just worn down. His attorney sat beside him flipping through a thick binder. My lawyer, Tom Whitaker, gave me a quick nod. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be." The mediator, an older woman with a calm voice and steel eyes, laid out the process. We'd start together, then break into separate rooms while she carried offers back and forth. Civil, controlled, contained. Grant spoke first. "I built my home legally," he said. "The drainage system was approved. I never intended harm. This has spiraled into a public spectacle that's damaged my reputation. I almost laughed at the word spectacle, but I held it in. When it was my turn, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My family has farmed that land since 1990, I said. We followed every rule required to earn and maintain organic certification. We warned you before the pool was completed that the drainage posed a risk. You chose not to modify it. The result is documented contamination, financial loss, and long-term soil damage. This isn't about spectacle. It's about responsibility. The mediator nodded slowly and then split us into separate rooms. For hours, it went back and forth. Offers that felt insulting. Counteroffers that felt impossible. At one point, Tom leaned back in his chair and whispered, "He's realizing this isn't going away." Because it wasn't just my word against his. We had water tests from multiple dates. Video footage of overflow events cascading downhill after pool parties and heavy rain. Soil analysis showing microbial decline in affected zones. A timeline that started with my warning in May. Late in the afternoon, the mediator came in with a different tone. They're prepared to settle at $380,000, she said. Full payment within 30 days. In addition, Mr. Hollis will redesign and reroute the drainage system at his own expense under supervision of an independent engineer. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. Tom looked at me. "That's your number." I nodded. When we reconvened to sign, Grant wouldn't quite meet my eyes. But just before we stood up, he did. "I never thought it would get this far," he said quietly. "Neither did I." That was it. No apology. No handshake. Just acknowledgement. The check cleared 3 weeks later. We hired a soil remediation specialist immediately. Tons of composted organic matter were brought in. Microbial inoculants. Careful flushing protocols to reduce residual chlorine. It will take years to fully rebuild that lower acre, but Denise has already outlined a path toward reinstatement. It's not hopeless. It's just slow. As for the drainage system, engineers were back on Grant's property by early spring. They tore up part of the terrace, installed a contained overflow tank, redirected discharge into a closed-loop filtration system that doesn't touch open ground. It cost him more than rerouting would have in the first place. Funny how that works. We don't talk much now. We wave sometimes. It's polite, distant. And here's the part that might surprise you. I don't hate him. For a long time, I thought I would. I replayed those early conversations in my head, the shrug, the not my problem. But somewhere between mediation and the first truckload of compost, something shifted. I realized Grant didn't wake up plotting to destroy my orchard. He woke up wanting a beautiful view and trusting that if something met code, it was fine. He saw land as backdrop. I saw it as living history. Those are different lenses. The real conflict wasn't pool versus farm. It was convenience versus consequence. There's a temptation, especially online, to flatten stories into hero and villain. Organic farmer good. Tech millionaire bad. But life's messier than that. Grant built what the system allowed him to build. The system just didn't account for what flowed downhill. If I hadn't pushed back, if I'd tried to quietly absorb the damage, none of this would have changed. The drainage would still be spilling onto my soil. Other hillside builds might repeat the same oversight. Sometimes making noise isn't about revenge. It's about visibility. The lower acre still looks rough. Some trees didn't make it. We had to remove a few this winter. Cutting them down felt like losing old friends. But the rest are budding again. Tentatively. Stubbornly. Last week, I stood at the fence line and watched the sunset reflect off Grant's pool. It's still beautiful. I can admit that. The water sits contained now, where it belongs. Laura came up beside me and bumped my shoulder. "Worth it?" she asked. I thought about the legal fees, the stress, the public scrutiny, the way our small town split into camps for a while. I thought about my dad, who always said land will teach you what you need to know if you're willing to listen. "Yeah," I said finally. "Worth it." Not because of the money, though that saved us. Not because of the headlines. Those fade. But because a line was drawn, and it held. And here's where I want to leave this with you. If you were in my position, what would you have done? Would you have tried to keep it quiet, negotiate behind closed doors? Or would you have put up the signs and let the world see? And if you were Grant, would you have rerouted the drainage when I first asked, even if it cost more? Or would you have trusted the permits and moved on? We live closer together than ever now. Glass houses next to old orchards, tech money next to generational soil. Conflicts like this aren't rare. They're just usually smaller, quieter. So I'm curious where you land on it. Was this justice? Or did it go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you probably think. And if you believe that doing the right thing sometimes means being the uncomfortable neighbor, hit like and subscribe. Because out here, gravity always wins. The only question is who's willing to stand downhill and say something about it.